Alright. Alright, guys. Well, we're already live. I gotta move in our screen here. But, professional. This is why you come. This is why the people come.
Yeah, very, very professional.
And now, I mean, it's just, getting back in the groove
I
of things.
mean, so professional that I just woke up from a nap. So, I mean, hey.
Right? Anyways, let me see. How was I doing this? Doing it as a window
That's how
capture.
we roll. That's how professional we are.
Precisely. Okay, we got that. That's what I wanted. Alright, and I have not yet updated the overlay, so if you guys are wondering why Clark from Christmas Vacation is filling in as Ricky, I guess Chevy Chase, whichever you prefer, the character, or the from Christmas Vacation, a holiday classic that I like. Has nothing to do with anything that we're talking about, but it had everything to do with the fact that it was simply in my downloads folder, and it was like, oh, I haven't fixed this overlay.
That's why I do modular overlays.
Yeah, I probably should be doing that, but
Yeah.
these are all things that should have been done off stream, but oh well.
Could have, would have, could have, but guess what? Didn't.
Exactly. So, as you guys know, this is or maybe you don't know, this is Real Life Problems. Unfortunately, Ricky, because of scheduling things, couldn't do the podcast anymore. Of course, there's no hard feelings. He might come on as a guest at some other point. I don't really know yet, but haven't had that all figured out. But obviously, everybody's on good terms. There's no bad blood there. It has nothing to do with any of that. So, anyways,
Exactly. It's just his schedule no longer lined up with ours.
exactly. It is that simple. But anyways, the discussion is about ableism tonight. Is it a systemic problem? I mean, I'm going to start simply with the fact that what is ableism, which, I mean, I think most people probably, well, I don't know if most people know, but it's discrimination in favor of able-bodied people. I mean, it's an ism. It's one of those.
One of the many isms in existence.
Right. But the thing that we're here to discuss is whether or not it's actually a systemic problem, which, when Glitch came to me with this, I was kind of like, I haven't really heard that. He actually heard that with amongst some of the accessibility community. I haven't really heard it that much, but it doesn't mean it's not happening. It doesn't mean people are trying to portray this thing as being a systemic problem. From what I looked at and from what I've seen, a lot of times I think instances where people are basically almost sort of claiming ableism in a lot of cases. A lot of times it's just ignorance. Like a prime example is today, for example, someone parked over in a spot. They weren't doing it maliciously. They weren't trying to do it to purposely be like, oh, fuck you because you're disabled. I'm going to park in this spot and I don't give a shit. It was nothing like that. It was more just ignorance on her part because she just wasn't thinking about it. The lady had just broken her hip. So, I mean, obviously I'm going to be a little bit more lenient on the situation and go by situational, situational awareness, because there are some people that just are ignorant to stuff, or in the case of this lady, there was just a lot going on her plate, and I'm not going to be it's not like I'm not going to be an understanding person. I can be a very understanding person. But anyways, that's just an example. I mean, I've run into that before where there was people that parked in the spot and they were just legitimately an asshole. They weren't doing it because they had some vendetta against handicapped people, though. They were doing it because they were simply just an asshole. So, I don't know. That's kind of like my little starting thing to this glitch. I know you definitely have heard people actually use this idea, spread this idea that it's a systemic problem, which I'm not really subscribing to that as being the case. Doesn't seem like it's systemic at all. Seems like it's just isolated cases of people. Really, in most cases, I mean, you can't even really claim true ableism in a lot of these instances, especially ones that I've been through in my own life. Um, so what's your take on this whole ableism being a systemic problem?
Um, I agree with you. I don't think it is as systemic as a lot of people say it is. I think that yes, our society does have some biases against us, just like they have biases in favor of many of the other isms that people claim about being systemic. But I don't
Yeah.
feel that it is necessarily there the way they think it is. It's one of those situations where if you look for it, you will find it.
Yeah. Yeah, if you try to
Sort
make
of thing.
it into something, I feel like you can find it if you're looking for it, but I think at the same time, like I was talking about, I think a lot of times it breaks down to the fact that people a lot of times are legitimately I think ignorant. Like, for instance, they just don't put two and two together, or they're just inherently a selfish asshole, and this transcends to other situations where, someone might claim racism, for example, but they're just an asshole. It's not anything beyond that. But I think there are some cases where there are people that get irritated by the fact that, oh, I have to flex for this person a little bit. I have to bend my day around waiting on. Say they get pissed off because they have to wait on some handicapped person because they're a little bit slower than someone else. And that to me would be an example of when they're being, that's being kind of discriminatory because the fact that,
Yeah, it's like in many
yeah,
cases, it's not that they're any of the ists. It's that they hate everyone equally.
right, right, and I think that's a lot of times where people get confused with, um, kind of labeling something as a systemic problem. Um, I think you got to be very careful with that type of labeling because I don't think inherently it's wrong to have terms like ableism. I'm not against the fact of that existing because there are cases where it does exist. Um, but I think the cases that are actually true ableism cases are few and far between. I don't think they're as I don't think it's um, but I think there are some cases where um, I think there's a lack of knowledge on people's part, and I think that should be an indicator as to why you and I are motivated to do the things that we do in terms of activism for to have a voice in gaming as well as having a voice in um, just accessibility in general. Obviously, just being able to have a voice and have it heard and make sure that um, things are being, people are being more aware of, like, that other people have problems and stuff. But um, I think that's more of what the focus should be on is making, providing people with the knowledge, of these things. So
I
then,
agree.
that way they can apply it to their life and maybe uh, instance of ignorance, just plain ignorance, which I think some people, I feel like a lot of times some people get confused with what ignorance actually means. Like I think some people get confused with that term too, where they think that that I'm talking about people that are, I'm talking about people that are not educated on the issue, but I'm not talking about people that are necessarily, like, people apply that as not knowing and disrespectful a lot of times, and that's not what that means. That just means not knowing, not being aware of. It doesn't mean that you're doing it with a malicious intent or anything like that. And I think some people get confused on even that term. I know we're not even talking about that, but I think some people literally think that ignorance means that you're an asshole. And it's more to do with, when I use that term, I'm talking about someone just not being aware. And that's, I just want to make that clear in case anybody was getting confused on that. Which I don't think anybody was, but at the same point, I've noticed that that's also another thing. But anytime you get into isms, I've noticed that it becomes a very slippery slope of things. It can go either way. It's easy to claim that, I feel. Now there are some times where I've seen it where almost like a reverse ableism type situation where it's like, which I hate that term because I know people hate reverse racism as a term too. That's a different thing, but I don't even want to go there. I don't even want to go there because I don't want us to get off track. The point that I'm making is that I've seen where maybe I don't want to use that term reverse, but I've seen it where there's been the case of opportunities being thrown my way due to the fact that someone sees my disability and sees that as, oh, I need to do something nice for this person and blow smoke up their ass. And I really don't like when people blow smoke up my ass. I'm not going to lie. I don't want you to just say that, oh, because you live your life, you're a hero. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm just living my fucking life and figuring out how to get around obstacles. Don't give some heartfelt speech about me being different than anybody else. It's like, I don't need it, and it's not appreciated. So I think that's an example of where I think people need to calm their shit, Stop trying to give these inspirational fucking talks every time, you see a handicapped person roll up in a Twitch chat, for example, or whatever. We don't want to hear it. It's not, it's not wanted. It's not needed. At least I don't want to hear it. I don't want someone blowing smoke up my ass, is the point that I'm making. And I feel like sometimes that can be an example of almost a fucked up version of ableism, I guess, in a way. Because they're treating you, it's almost like they're coddling you in a way, or treating you differently because of your disability. In a way that's like being like almost sympathetic as opposed to empathetic. And I don't want your sympathy, Empathy is different, though. Empathy's okay, but sympathy is offensive. What do you think about that?
I definitely think that you're right on that aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
It goes back to, if you look for something hard enough, you're going to find it, good or bad. It's one of it falls under a psychological trick called confirmation bias.
And how does
that? If you go around, essentially, if you go around thinking the world is ableist, as an example, if you go around with the mindset of society is ableist.
Yeah.
And then you run into a place where they didn't think ahead and they don't have a ramp for a stage for a venue. Then you're gonna immediately see that as ableist. You're like, see, I told you so. The world is ableist. They don't have a ramp here.
But
because you're looking for it, you've confirmed it in your own mind.
Yeah. Now the other thing also is, the other question would be, um, did you explain to the venue that you needed this accommodation? Because if you don't speak up about accommodations, I'm sorry, but you should not expect a place to just comply with something if they're unaware of the circumstances of the situation. Now, if they're aware of the situation and they don't comply, then that's a different story. That could be a case of ableism, most definitely. But that's the thing. A lot of people complain about, oh, well, they didn't accommodate this, but it's like, wait a second. If you didn't speak up, or the person that cares for you isn't speaking up about it, then I'm sorry, I'm not going to feel bad for your situation if you did not vocalize this. Like, I'm just not. I'm not going to agree with you that's ableist either if you came to me with that. I would say, wait a second.
A lot of the people that that have this claim are like, but we shouldn't have to speak up. It should just be there.
No, I don't agree. I don't agree with that at all.
I'm sorry, but that is entitlement. It does cost a little bit more in many cases to make things just a bit more accessible and accommodating. Many people are actually willing to pay the cost to accommodate you if you speak up.
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't speak up, then why should they?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, I don't know what else to really say on that, because it's just kind of like, if you don't, you got to be an advocate for yourself. You can't just expect the world to bend at your will and know, or read your fucking mind. How the,
Exactly. I mean, don't get me wrong. It would be gloriously beautiful if we could one day live in a world where we don't have to expend the little bit of extra energy it takes to ask, hey, could you do this because I'm this way?
Yeah, because I mean,
it would be great to live in that ideal world, but you know what? We don't. Get over your entitled self, stop thinking the world is ableist, and speak up. Humans have not developed the ability to read minds yet. As soon as we do, please let me know, because I'd love to learn.
Right, exactly. That's not even a thing, That's not even, I mean, it's a ridiculous conversation. I mean, I think the point is that I think that people need to vocalize things. You need to speak up, and you need to be like willing to put in a little bit of work. Because I mean, I'm not saying that, would it be great if everybody just automatically knew what accommodations one needed? But it's different for every person, and if they don't know you, how the fuck are they supposed to know that, oh, this person's in a wheelchair? Well, it doesn't really tell you a lot. That's not very revealing.
Now, I will be honest. There are some situations where I do see what they're talking about.
Right.
When they're claiming systemic ableism. Now, like, if you're a deaf person, a deaf expert going to speak at a conference geared towards deaf people, it's obvious they should have a sign language interpreter on standby for their deaf experts. And if they don't, well, then obviously they didn't think that event through properly, did they?
Right. You shouldn't be holding handicap events and not allowing for things like that, because that's...
Yeah, it goes back to nothing about us without us.
Yeah, so, by the way, guys, sorry that the closed captioning is not working on here. I'll have to figure that out for next week. I do apologize, but hopefully, I think it'll be on the YouTube video once this is offline, because I think there's a way to do that. Don't know how good it is, so you'll have to bear with me on that one. Yeah, me speaking of not being prepared, but that's more due to technical issues on something that was supposed to be set up and working. So
very true.
That's a completely different situation.
And that's not anything I have any control over either. So blame it all on Wheels over there. It's all his fault.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, but anyways, I don't think it's a systemic problem though. I just don't. I mean, I could say that maybe there's a systemic problem of people being ignorant to some stuff, maybe, but I mean, there's people that are ignorant to a lot of things. So I don't know. Maybe there's an epidemic of people being ignorant. I don't know. Uh, seems like that's more. Seems like that's a more likely systemic problem than this. To be honest with you, ignorance is ignorance. I think that's a systemic problem right there, guys. That's the real deal.
Our lack of critical thinking skills is another systemic problem, I think.
I would tend to agree with neither one of those ideas. So I don't know.
Like I don't know. I don't know. I've just noticed that after I got out of school, it's almost like they forgot how to teach critical thinking.
Yeah, I don't know.
I started noticing the change as I went up through middle and high school.
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's like I don't even know. Like it seems like these kids are passing, and it's just like they don't know anything.
Yeah.
And I'm like confused by this.
Here you go, participation prize, just because everybody else graduates school.
Right. I mean, because a lot of times what I've been seeing, guys, and I know this is a little bit off topic. Well, it's connected. It's all connected. My mom is actually a teacher, and I think I've noticed that she's kind of seen some of the, some of these kids that just, it's like they almost expect to just pass without doing any work. And it's just like, that's ridiculous. Like, this isn't elementary anymore, I can understand elementary, you get through the grades, but even then, I got held back in elementary. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm not saying that you have to be, but I'm just making the point that they actually cared enough about my education to kind of like be like, hey, he can't do this. Let's hold him back a little bit so he can get those, It was basically because I didn't have reading skills, and that's kind of an important thing.
Yeah, it is. It is. I was never actually held back, but I do know others who were. So
yeah. I mean, I don't think any less of myself because of it. I think it's just one of those things.
There is nothing less of anyone for that. It just
took
you a little bit longer to grasp the concept. That's all it was. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right, which actually is tied to muscular dystrophy a little bit because there are because I miss dystrophin in my body, that does it makes it difficult to focus on things. So I end up with ADD type symptoms. So I can, it was just a focus issue. It was a attention focus issue.
Now, like I said, I do think our society is biased against people with disabilities, and I think some disabilities face more bias than others, especially learning disabilities.
Right. I think I was talking about this with a buddy on the phone today about how invisible disabilities, like he was talking about how the fact that a lot of times, he's bipolar, he's kind of learned that don't bring that up in an interview. Because he's like, the likelihood of me getting hired was saying that. He said that it actually affected employment for him. So that's just an example. But the crazy thing he was talking about is that, he shares the fact that he's a recovering alcoholic, and that somehow isn't as big of a deal to them as being bipolar. So that's kind of...
Yeah, which I find absolutely hilarious. And it goes back to our thing here. Yes, our society has strong biases against people with disabilities. I don't think it's one of the isms, though.
Yeah.
Just like our society does have clear bias against people of certain races. But does it make it an ist or an ism situation? I don't think so.
Right. I mean, I think
there is a difference between bias against and hatred of, which is what the isms and ists actually stand for. They stand for hatred of said thing. strong discrimination
Right.
and hatred of said thing.
Right. For instance, like from experience from my life, I have only I don't even think I've actually met a person like this. Maybe I've come across them, but I have never actually. I've heard about white supremacists, for example, but I have never actually, through my whole entire life, I've never actually had. Maybe I was in the same room with the person, or maybe I walked by them in like a mall or something, but I can't think of a time that I actually had a conversation with a person that was like that. The reason why I use that as an example is just the fact of how much of a rarity it is to come across a person that has the level of hate that we're talking about towards something, like to where they're that dedicated to, you know, like you know, get putting on a hood or whatever, you know, because there's the Ku Klux Klan. I've never ran into anybody like that. Just an example. The only reason why I'm bringing this up is just the fact that, I mean, I'm almost 32 years old and I've never come across a person like that. Doesn't mean they don't exist. I'm not saying that, but I'm making the point that you could literally go your whole entire life and never come across a person like that you've met in real life. That's how crazy, like, that's just an example. The only reason why I say that is just because the fact that, again, it's not that it doesn't exist, it's just the fact of the matter is that in everyday life, you don't come across people that think that way.
Exactly.
It's not a typical thing. It's not like,
and
you know.
and here's another thing: a lot of us in the disability sphere / community / whatever you want to call it don't really think about too. And this is something that I tried to make a point about whenever I recently did a video on why I don't think people should be throwing around the term ableism so freely.
Right.
It's the cry wolf problem.
Yeah.
If you go around saying this is ableist, that is ableist, this is ableist, that is ableist, everything is ableist, and you keep doing it enough, the general public are going to be like, oh, blah, that's just the way they are. Yeah, and whenever you do run across something that actually deserves to be called out, and you call it out, the term's lost its meaning. Nobody cares.
Yeah,
because you're saying that about everything as it is already.
The definition has been lost on people. They don't truly understand or comprehend what the true definition of it is anymore, due to the fact that there is such a simple labeling being placed on
exactly.
To where it's just like, oh, well, it gets mixed into everything else, and then it's just like it falls between the cracks, and then when something happens where it definitely needs to be called out, there you may not get the response that you wanted, you know. Or
the prime example of something that deserves to be called out is when one of these events for the disabled doesn't accommodate the disability that they're supposed to be trying to advocate for.
Yeah,
that's one of those situations that needs to be called out, but because of the fact that the term's been thrown around so much, and I see it so often in everyday, referring to everyday life sorts of things, it's one of those cry wolf situations, almost. The general public's not going to believe you if you're talking about it being everywhere.
Exactly.
When they need to take notice of it being in these certain situations where it's actually there and needs to be called out. Nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to take note.
Now, have you in your life actually experienced ableism towards yourself?
Honestly, I can't say that I have. I can say that I have experienced bias against various biases against people with limited vision in my own life.
And that could be positive biases as well, like in a way, I guess.
Yes, there are some positive biases that I've encountered, but I've also encountered some negative ones. And disproving those biases is sort of one of those things that I don't know, it gives me strength.
Right. Well, would you say that there's a difference
That's
between stereotyping a situation and an ableist situation? Obviously, I mean, right?
there's a big difference. There
Yeah.
is a massive difference between,
Yeah.
a stereotypical bias, which is what society has a lot of because
Right.
humans by nature love to throw things in boxes so that we can understand similar things.
Yeah.
I don't understand that part of many people's brains, but everything belongs in a box. Irritatingly.
Yeah.
And
Which. Yeah.
but I have experienced some stereotyping and some biases, but I don't think I have ever outright experienced true ableism by definition of the word.
Yeah. Now, I would say that
I don't think I have ever experienced somebody going out of their way to discriminate against me because they are ableist.
Right.
Which is what the term
Yeah.
actually means.
Yeah, like I was saying to you when we were having a conversation before we even did this episode, the fact that I feel like it would have to be something as blatant as almost someone saying that I hate you because you're disabled. Like that's like I mean that's kind of I mean that's pretty. I mean I know that's pretty straightforward. I know it could be more complicated than that potentially, but I mean that's what I think when the basic understanding of it is. But also I think that I've come across a situation where it was like, for instance, I was wondering, I felt like maybe I was getting less hours at this job that I was working at because they felt like maybe I wasn't able to excel at the job at the level that they wanted. And I felt like maybe it was against me, but as time's gone on, I don't necessarily know if it was just them just having a problem directly with me because what I think I created a problem for myself is when I said, do you have an issue? I actually called the manager out and was like, is there a problem with, do you have an issue with the fact that I'm in a chair? Like, you think that that's causing is that making you, give me less hours or whatever? And it kind of created more of a problem than it actually solved. So I don't know if I created an instance of ableism or if that was already going on or if they just had some issue with me personally. And I think it was more that they may have had an issue with me personally, to be honest with you. I don't know.
I forget exactly what it's called, but there's a thing that is never attribute something to malicious intent when another description could serve the situation better.
Right, and maybe that was the case there.
And what ended up happening was, your performance was on par with the performance of other people who had similar hourly or hour cuts, know, and you just immediately assumed, oh, they've got it out for me because I'm disabled.
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of times that's what I'm talking about. A lot of the people in our sphere, in our space, in the disability community, we have this thing of they're out to get me because I'm disabled, even though it could be just as simple as, hey, your performance is honestly not up to par with everyone else who's doing the same job. And this is where some of the inherent biases come in.
Right.
If they can pay somebody else the same amount of money per hour and get more work out of them, capitalistic nature says, do it. It's nothing against disabilities. It's nothing ableist or racist or sexist or whatever. It is capitalism in its purest form. We have designed a system which encourages companies, corporations, any employers to drive profit margins up by getting as much from as little as possible.
Right. I mean, that's true. And I mean, I'm not saying that, like, I don't go around, like, claiming this. I mean, there was some legitimate reason. Like, I'm not going to get into the whole story, but there was definitely some things brought up that kind of made me wonder, made me question it a little bit. But I think overall, what I would say is that I kind of set myself up for a problem by accusing someone of that, because I feel like it it unfortunately caused a ripple in that relationship, and I eventually just had to leave the company because
Yeah,
it just was too awkward of a situation. And I would say that be very careful about being accusatory about things like that. That was kind of the lesson that
exactly.
I learned from
It's
that.
one of those. It's definitely one of those things that you don't want to accuse someone of being an ist of any kind
Right,
unless you are 100% sure that they are, unless they have
right.
like exhibited the same behavior with other people
Uh,
similar to yourself in some way,
I give this
then you can
example.
accuse them.
I give this example because I don't, it's a learning thing. I was a lot younger though when this happened. Okay, so mind that as well. Not my thinking now, obviously,
I
but
mean, the first thing I would do, like if you ever, this is a little guide to if you think someone is
yeah,
ableist, right? The first thing you do is if they make a comment that you or do something that you take as being ableist, talk to them about it. See if they were aware that what they did could be offensive to people with disabilities. In most cases,
they'll be
you will
ignorant.
find that they were not aware. They
Right.
did not know. They did not think, which is part of where I'm coming from about
Yeah.
critical thinking needing to be taught. But hey, that's for a different day.
Yeah, that's a whole episode there.
Yeah, but and I get it. I get it. I get it. It shouldn't be your job to educate. But you know what? You're the one with the special condition. You're the expert on it. How are
Yes.
they supposed to know?
So
You're
share
the
that.
expert on it in their life.
Yeah.
Share that information.
It could
Yes,
be
I
helpful.
understand it's draining, it's exhausting to have to explain yourself 1,000 times a day sometimes to various people across the world. I get it. I live it. It is exhausting. But if you
Yeah.
do it, if you give those explanations instead of being confrontational and labeling them as an ableist just because they didn't
Ugh.
think, how are they supposed to know?
Right. Yeah.
Especially, this goes even more so if you have an invisible disability. Even more so, how are they supposed to know?
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. I don't know.
Unless you come out and speak up and ask for what you need. Yes, it's exhausting. Yes, it's more steps than anybody else has to deal with. But it comes with the territory of being disabled.
Right. So
There is no way around it until we get to that idealistic utopian society where society itself is structured in an accommodating way that no one at all ever has to ask for anything they need because it's already there.
Yeah,
We are a long way from that day.
Let's live in
Until that
reality
day
here.
comes, you have to help reach for that day by actually opening your mouth and asking the questions, delivering the information, taking that energy drain. And yes,
Right.
trust me, again, I know it's draining. I live it. I'm legally blind. Sometimes the way I move around, the way I act, sometimes people can't tell that I'm legally blind because I have some usable vision. I've got enough to function somewhat normally in some cases. So I live it. It is exhausting to have to ask for accommodations that other people don't have to ask for, or to have to jump through hoops that other people don't have to jump through. I get it. But that doesn't mean the world around you is stacked entirely against you. People, things, processes are now much more accommodating than they used to be.
Well, yeah.
And it's a lot easier to get what you need now. All you have to do is ask.
Yeah, because think about it, like, and you go to a lot of places where there's a handicap setup on like things like drink fountains, for example, just to be a simple little thing. Um, you know, there's also a handicap button on a lot of gas stations now. That's something that I've
I
noticed.
actually, yeah, I actually saw the transformation whenever it comes to the water fountain situation. Remember, I was born in '87.
Right.
87 to early 90s, a lot of places only had a single fountain, and it was average chest height for a person.
Yeah, I mean, I was born '89, so I mean, I did kind of see some of that
Big,
too.
super tall ones. Big, super tall ones. Now, just about any water fountain you see, there's two of them. There's one that's the average chest height, or maybe it's actually a little bit lower than that now. It's now about stomach height. Some like myself, I gotta bend over pretty far to reach it.
Yeah.
But right next to that one, there is a wheelchair height water fountain.
Hell,
Always, never
they even
fails.
added the convenience of if you have like a water bottle now, you can fucking put that up to like. I mean, that's more of
Yeah,
like that's not an accessibility feature. That just happens to be. Well, maybe it could be. Maybe there's some people that see that as that. I don't know. I don't really know if you could throw it under there. But I
I
guess
mean,
you know.
the world is changing. We are slowly overcoming those inherent societal biases.
Yeah.
But we can't keep pushing for that world where they're gone if people are going to keep accusing everyone everywhere of being ableist, because
Yeah. If
that puts people it puts people in a confrontational mindset.
Right, right, I agree. But now one thing I would say is, how many times have you actually had a person be nice and actually do something to ask you if they need help? Like, how many times has that happened? That's happened a lot in my life, and I'm not offended by that. I'm not offended when someone asks me, "Hey, and there's some people in the handicap world that might even try to turn that around and say, "Oh, they're being ableist because they're trying to help me." It's like, no, no, don't take it that way. And sometimes it can be annoying when someone, like, when you got something, when you're taking care of something and then someone asks if they could help you, but don't take it as an insult. Be nice to the person. Don't be a dick. Like, there's no reason for that. There's already enough assholes
Exactly.
in the world. Okay, even if you don't need the help, you can politely say to them, "Hey, I appreciate you asking, but I got this." Um, and that's the thing that I also believe in, is that if you see a handicapped person having trouble, instead of just helping them, ask first, because sometimes that can be taken. I'm not saying walk on eggshells, but I'm just making the point that could be taken wrong. Someone could look at that in the wrong context. I usually don't. I thank the person. I'm like, "Hey, you saw I was struggling, and you came in and helped me out. I appreciate that. But the point that I'm making is that I've actually come across people being nice to me and trying to help me in the world, as opposed to people that were against me in the world. There's more people that want to help us than want to hurt us, is the point that I'm making. I think, because the fact that I can count, I lose count on my, like, I can't even count it on my hands and toes how many times someone has offered help or given help to me that was a stranger out in the world. I don't know about you, Glitch, but I definitely can't even. There's countless times for me where I've encountered that.
Yeah, it happens more times than those who wish to be hateful.
Right. I think there's a lot of wonderful. I think there's a lot more goodness in the world than people give it credit. Because I think another thing that goes along with this whole systemic ableism thing is, I think, this whole idea that, like you were saying, the world's out to get you, and it's just this negative demeanor that, like, comes off of these people, to where it's like, you know, why such negativity?
I
And
get you entirely. Trust me.
it
It's
brings you down. It's like you don't want to be. It's like these people are almost soul sucking.
Mhm.
and exhausting. Because it's
Very true.
It's just like, if you want to be heard, you're not going to be, people are not going to want to listen to someone that is angry all the time.
Or accusing them of something that they didn't do, or that being something that they aren't.
Yeah, being accusatory all the time, you know? Nobody likes to feel like the finger's being pointed at them. Let the person explain themselves. Ask questions. Don't assume stuff. Ask questions. You know, be inquisitive. You know, I don't know what happened to critical thinking skills, but they've seemed to have all but gone away. Where it's like, if you see a situation happening, why don't you ask questions about it and get to the bottom of it? And I guarantee you, you probably will be surprised to know that more times than not, it came down to ignorance of the situation, or it was just simply the person was just unaware. You know, they just were completely unaware, which I guess is technically the same thing as ignorance. But, you know, I think it falls under that sort of category. To where, and I think that's the thing that people need to do. If you think someone's ableist, don't immediately go saying you're ableist. Ask some questions. You know.
Yeah, ask them, hey, were you aware that what you did or what you said right here, and give them exactly what it is they said or did. Were you aware that what you said or did is offensive to people with disabilities like myself? Or could be offensive to people with disabilities like myself? You know, reach out, ask.
Yeah, because
if they say no, then be like, yo, do you mind working on that then? Because I was offended by it. It hurt me. What you did there hurt me. Do you mind working on that? In many cases, they'll be like, yo, not at all. Just, hey, let me know in the future if I do it again. Or if I do something else that could be offensive.
Right,
just
right.
Let me know. Because they don't want to be labeled as an ist or an ism.
Yeah, I mean, who the fuck wants to be labeled?
They don't want that label.
Yeah, I don't think anybody.
So if you immediately go throwing that label onto them without opening the dialogue and asking, being like, hey, you know, this is a little bit hateful to people with disabilities. Most cases you'll get, wow, no, I didn't. How? You know, you'll have people asking you, how is it hateful? And, you know, wanting to learn, wanting to understand. Right. Because they didn't think. A lot of what is classified as ableist is people who just didn't think.
Right. I think that's the case. I think that a lot of times that very much is the case.
They don't encounter it on a daily basis, so they didn't think.
So I think
there's no malice there.
I think the answer to this question, though, is ableist a systemic problem? I would say the answer is no. I don't believe it to be.
The clear answer is no. If you look for it hard enough, though, you're going to find it. You're going to have that confirmation bias.
Right, exactly. And then it's going to be...
And that's simply because of all of the societal bias against people with disabilities that does still exist.
Right.
If you're looking for ableism, being a systemic problem, you're going to find that little bit of bias that still exists and be like, yeah, it's a systemic problem. Confirmation bias. Done. But the thing about any of the isms, ableism, racism, sexism, anything like that, it is a discrimination. If you actually look up the full definition of the words, it is a discrimination born from hatred against a person of X variable, depending on what the ism is.
Right.
The part that a lot of people are missing in these instances where we're talking about societal isms is the born of hatred part of the definition.
Right.
I don't think the hatred exists.
No, I don't think so either. But yeah, I mean, I think I think it's like anything else. Like, you can look at people that try to make you believe conspiracy theories. A lot of what they're doing is very similar, and like you could find
Confirmation bias.
yeah, you can find connections with things if you want it to be there. You can make a connection happen, but
Yeah.
it
And
does.
like I said, it's that little bitty piece of psychology called confirmation bias. And
Yeah,
social media teaches us that that's a good thing because social media sticks us in a bubble where we live in a world of confirmation bias.
yeah, because we should get you should get all your news from social media because it's so accurate.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to make really, you really are going to know your way around the world by, you know, by what,
Listening to all the people in the world who think the same way you do.
yeah, all the fucking Timmies in the world that are posting the same shit that you're like, oh, I agree with this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, not all the Timmies are right.
Living in a bubble.
Right, you effectively put yourself in a vacuum, and the reason why is because, well, you follow people that you tend to gravitate towards. Then you pretty much have a bubble of a bunch of people that are all saying the same things.
Yeah, the echo chamber effect.
Now, what's kind of funny as a streamer is that, well, I feel like I have a barrage of different things going on, to
Yeah,
where it's like
that's what I try to do too. I try to follow a bunch of people, even some of the streamers that I don't watch regularly. I do follow them just because they have a different viewpoint from me.
right. And what I tend to find is that a lot of the people that I am following, I do not we do not align when it comes to political thoughts and ideas, but that is not what that Twitter was about. That's not what it was designed to discuss. Um, Although, if someone does want to discuss these things, I got no problem doing that. But I'm not trying to take away from the focus of what this show is about,
Yeah.
because it's not about politics. It's about accessibility and how that affects our lives. Um, you know, and I don't think I don't think people should be. Don't be afraid of the world, but I think there are a lot of people that do have biases towards handicapped people. I mean, I think that's just inherently a thing, obviously. But
It happens. There's no getting around it. There are biases in our society. And to be honest with you, there will always be biases in our society against people with disabilities. There is no real good way around it.
yeah, yeah, but I see it as more of like um, I don't know. I see it as there being more of a problem with people being just unaware of things more so than anything else, as opposed to actual ableist behavior. Like I've been saying, I think a lot of people will assume stuff, and you know,
Again, like I said, I think I think I remember it's either Hamlin's razor or Occam's razor. I forget which one it is, but it's never attribute something to malice when simple ignorance can suffice.
right, right,
And that's what a lot of people are doing by calling out this quote systemic ableism problem. Is they're attributing the problems that they're facing to malice when it's just simple ignorance.
right. So, for instance, like a show, like this
I
show, like
mean, people don't know. They didn't think. Wait, they weren't trained to think. I'm sorry. Yes, I said it there. They weren't trained to think.
yeah, exactly. But I kind of, guys, I honestly don't know what more I could really share about ableism, in terms of like just I don't know. I think that, like I said before, I think there's a lot more of people that are generous and nice and want to help people in the world than there are people that don't.
I agree.
Like I just think that's the case. I'm not saying that everybody's nice in the world. We're not, but
No, we're not. There's some bad apples. There's some
but
ignorant individuals who refuse to learn because they don't want to, not because they, whatever. There are some people who are genuinely hateful of people with disabilities
mhm,
and who definitely have those bad takes. But
for sure.
I don't think society itself is hateful towards us. Because again,
Mm-mm.
that's what these ism terms stand for. A discrimination against someone born from hatred.
Right, plain and simple.
That's the phrase that everybody's missing. Born from hatred.
Yeah, like and I think very few times, like I said, I mean, look at the example of how long I went through my whole life and have never met a person in like the Klan or like a white supremacist that I can even think of. Maybe I've come cross paths with one, but I wouldn't have known if I did. So that's the whole point that I'm making is that you're likely to come across a kind person first before you would ever come across someone that is that full of hate in their heart,
Mm-hmm.
because there's very few people that carry around and harbor that level of hatred, because
Exactly.
you kind of end up almost being like a uh, idealistic person that is so against something that you're like, you're going out of your way to be against it. And that's just the most extreme example I can think of, because think about how far white supremacists or Nazis will go to basically show their hatred. It's almost like they go out of their way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so far removed from any sort of ignorance that yeah, I just don't. I think the
Now,
likely
now,
good.
don't get me wrong. There are people out there that do believe in some form of eugenics who wish to eliminate people with disabilities from the gene pool to quote unquote better humanity, which I think is a despicable thing. But those people could be considered ableist. That is born from hatred. They hate abnormalities
I've never come
of
across
any
these.
kind.
I've never come across these
I
people.
haven't either. I
Um,
just know they exist. I've read things about them. I know they exist.
I think.
Have I met one myself? No.
I think. It makes me. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's just crazy. I don't know. That's just.
Like some of these people that want to be able to early detect certain disabilities before a baby is born and be able to abort that child before they're even born into the world with those disabilities. Yeah, I'm not cool with that.
Right
Like,
now.
yes, it's gonna be nice to know if your child has a disability, but every life deserves to at least have a chance
Right,
to thrive.
but here's an example of like, for instance, a lot of people that have like since it's a genetic disorder, it's carried by the mother. A lot of times, in families that, in my world, muscular dystrophy, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll do a gender selection type thing, where it's actually, but that's different. That's a different case because they're actually picking something based on it's not like, I don't know. It's like it's being selected and stuff, and they're using science and stuff, and that's different than abortion, though. That's not like they're aborting stuff. You know what I mean? I have no problem with people figuring that out, but I do have a problem with what you're saying, because that takes it to a whole other level where it's like, you know. But then again, you hear stories about, like, for instance, there was the There's a football player named Tim Tebow, and his mom was told that, oh, he might be handicapped, but she said, he's not handicapped, by the way, but it doesn't matter. It was the fact that the part that I'm focusing on is the fact that as a mother, she said that, no, I'm not going to do that. She didn't even consider it as an option. If he was going to be disabled, she was just going to deal with it. And I think that that's the right way to think, not the wrong way to think. Um, you know, but I think if we go in a direction where people are thinking like that, I just don't think it's going to lead to anything good. We certainly don't want to encourage that.
And by calling everyone everywhere ableist, even though they're not, instead of trying to educate them, that's the kind of world we are, whether we realize it or not, inadvertently pushing for, because people will be like, hey, I don't want to bring another kid into this world that's going to treat me like shit because I didn't think.
Right.
Pardon my language, but that's the way the general populace is going to be.
Yeah, and we don't want that. We don't want a world that's like that. That's not a good thing.
No, it isn't.
So, but I mean, the whole point
is the point is never attribute to malice what could be explained away by ignorance.
Right, and I think that's the conclusion here, guys, because I think we pretty much talked about ableism to the point of exhaustion. I know I'm exhausted.
There's literally nothing else to say.
Right, exactly. But as clearly it is a no. It is not a systemic problem. That is my final thoughts on that. It's just straight up no. It's not. It's just not. I don't see it.
I mean, I'm gonna put an open floor line out to other disabled individuals. If you happen to see this episode and you disagree with us and wish to debate this like civilized human beings, feel free to reach out, because I'd love to talk.
Right, and that's what this is about. This is about having conversations that are open to discussion. That it's not
exactly.
It's not about it's not about who's right, who's wrong, and and a lot of times it's not necessarily, we're not, when we're having a conversation like that, it's not, we go into it with the idea that we're listening to the other person's viewpoints, and we're not necessarily, there's no trying to convince anybody of anything. It's not about that. It's about simply getting your views out there.
Listening and understanding. Yes, I would love nothing more than to have someone who holds that view that there is a systemic ableism problem in societies these days. I would love to get one of you guys on who feels that way. I want to find out why. I want to talk. Let's open that dialogue. Who knows? You might change my mind.
Right, but it's just...
Or I might change yours. That it can happen.
But the point I think is we're trying to sell basically the idea that you can listen to other people and you can listen to viewpoints and disagree, but do it respectfully and not be have an actual dialogue that actually helps as opposed to hurts.
Exactly. It just so happens that Wheels and I sort of came to the same general conclusion about it this week. I mean, I was surprised, to be honest.
Well, I mean, it just depends. It depends. We're not always completely going to be aligned on things, but that doesn't mean...
No, we're not.
That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean that we can't have educational debates about things. And, I know that's becoming another topic all in itself, but I'm just making the point that that's one thing that I kind of want to maintain about the flavor of this show, is that we are always open for discussions without judgment.
Exactly. No judgment here.
There's no judgments here. It's all about sharing ideas and getting that dialogue, because I feel like as fellow handicapped people, or even people that aren't, that are just curious about the world of accessibility, I feel like we need to stick together in terms of providing each other with knowledge, as opposed to trying to go against each other's ideas, and I just don't think I don't think it's good. I think we should
Yeah,
collect
it's
ideas and
collect ideas, spread them, because what works for you may not work for someone else, and what works for someone else may not work for you. There's a million different ways to solve the same problem, and we need to
right.
collect all of those ways and listen and be understanding, because that's the best way to solve a problem.
Right, exactly. But anyways, guys, I don't know what I don't even know what the topic for next week will be. Uh, we'll figure that out. We'll have something.
I'll figure it out and surprise you. Trust me.
Right. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and you can check us out on Twitter at what is it at Problem Wheel
Problems wheel.
at Problems Wheel, and Glitched is at what at Glitch Vision. What is it?
Just Glitch Vision.
At Glitch
On
Vision
Twitter.
on Twitter, and then at Wheelchair Gamer for me. Gamer spelled with a 3 instead of an E. And guys, don't forget, this has been Wheel Life Problems. Keep it wheel, and we'll see you next week.
Indeed. Have a good one.
Bye now.